So, um, picture in picture. All right. So, everybody, welcome to episode one of the Onyx Stop podcast. So, I'm recording, but also for those who are on the live stream, I'm doing this a little bit live. So, you know, I hope everybody is able to see it on Instagram and Facebook. You might hear some noises. People are still popping fireworks and haven't gotten to the point where I'm able to truly have a whole setup yet, but we're going to build up to that. So, you know, I'm going to use this podcast just to really emphasize the core values of Onyx thought, which is PAC, Pan Africanism, Afro globalism, communalism, and knowledge, right? So, today I want to showcase the foundations of some of that here, which is emphasizing definitely on communalism and knowledge, but like everything that makes us human revolves around culture. All right. So today, what I want to do with this episode is talk about what makes a culture. Why is culture important? What is culture? Many of us speak about culture a lot, but do we ever really take time to really think about what makes up a culture? All right. So I'm going to read off something here. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of what is called the cultural iceberg. The cultural iceberg was something created by anthropologist Edward T. Hall in 1976 to illustrate the visible and invisible aspects of culture. All right. So, what this iceberg, or when it shows us, is the surface level of culture or the visible aspects of culture that we pay attention to a lot. Aspects such as food, music, language, visual arts, festivals, performing arts, literature, holiday customs, flags, games, and dress. These are the things that we look at a lot of times when we speak about culture. But um, very seldom do we truly sit down and really talk about what lies underneath the iceberg. We only speak about the tip of it, and what lies underneath are the aspects we don't really think about a lot, such as nature of friendship, values, religious beliefs, notions of beauty, norms, etiquette, rules, body language, expectations, leadership styles, attitudes towards social status, notions of self, perceptions, attitudes towards age, notions of modesty, thought processes, etc., etc. These are all the things that are pretty much what makes up a worldview and that gives birth to the tip of the iceberg. We don't really think about these things a lot when we speak about culture, right? We only think about what's on the surface level, I'm not going to say menial because they are important, but what we see, the beauty, the aesthetics, that is what we think about most of the time when we speak about culture. So today, I want to build upon that a little bit, right? Because a lot of times when we speak about culture, the biggest question becomes, what does that mean to us as a group of people? So I've spoken about the cultural iceberg, and now I want to explain the importance of knowing cultural origin, particularly for people of African descent. And I might be speaking a whole lot more to African Americans more than anything because that is the mind frame that I am coming from and that I am the most knowledgeable of when it comes down to culture, right? So uh, I always pinpoint, why is this conversation of where does our culture originate from so important? What's so special about this conversation? Why do we need to speak about it? Every now and then I see people where they speak about, we're here now, we're black, we don't know anything about Africa. There's no need to mention about Africa. We're American now, right? And I always find that very interesting. And this is the reason why. Yes, we are Americans by citizenship. Yes, we have made a culture here. But like everything, where are the origins of that culture coming from? Right? That's always my question, and people don't really tend to sit down and think about that, right? Because everything has an origin. You can say that it doesn't matter where you came from or what's the origin. We're all here, we're all American now. You can have someone that is of another skin tone tell you that it doesn't matter, that we're all here now, and we just need to focus on us as Americans here. Now, I always find this very interesting when people bring up where we originate from doesn't matter, right? But then you go to the doctor's office and they're asking you what's your race. Because there are certain things where, when it comes down to as simple as certain diseases, such as sickle cell, it mostly occurs amongst people of African descent. Why? Because we had the most interactions with malaria. So our blood developed pathogens in order to combat it. So therefore, we have sickle cell disease, right? That's a form of a mutation. Most people don't know that, um, you know, the main people who have, I forget the name of it, but there's a certain type of disorder, I think, dealing with fibroids that's found within black women. You really find it mostly occurring in women of African descent at the highest. And that is the reason why people will always ask at the doctor's office, what is your race first, in order to do the best that they can in order to help you, right? Because they can't ignore the fact that you have genetics spanning and that has been made for over the past 100,000 years due to the environment that you were in, due to the environment that you were in that has made you genetically. So let's think about that. You might bring up, we've been here for 400 years, it doesn't matter, right? But 400 years in comparison to the scope of 100,000 years, that's not going to impact your genetics unless there was a huge amount of admixture introduced into your genome. And even though African Americans have a genome of probably 25 or less percentage of European DNA, it is not enough to really disrupt the African component, right? But that's neither here nor there. The reason why I bring that up is because part of the reason why this affects you is because your environment also shaped your culture. Your culture is a byproduct of the environment that you came from and will impact you for the long term. All right. Now, let's speak about this a little bit. Us speaking about our cultural origins are important because it lets us know where certain thought patterns come from and what is the importance of these thought patterns. Not only does it let us know where do these thought patterns come from or what are the importance of these thought patterns, but it also gives us a sense of identity and paying reverence to where we come from. You can say that paying reverence and means nothing, and we already have a sense of identity uh, over in um, the hold on. You can say that we already have a stream of identity right here, but keep in mind, however, that the stream of identity that we have here didn't just appear out of osmosis. And if you say that it doesn't matter because we're in a new place, that's very false. Because if that was the case, why are people of European descent still naming streets, still naming towns, paying reverence to their ancestral homelands over in Ireland, over in Dutch over in Netherlands and everything. That's because they're acknowledging their origin point. Acknowledging your origin point is always going to be important for people, right? It's always going to be important. They will let you think that it means nothing, yet, let's be honest about this. Every single day, we're paying homage to one of the four founders, one of their four founders, who doggone set up the Constitution. And bear in mind that four founder has a different history when it comes down to us. They were an enslaver. So if you say that your history and your cultural origin doesn't mean anything, then who are you constantly paying homage to? Right? Let's think about that. Who are you constantly paying homage to? And we don't ever think about this because even think about when people bring up their admixtures, they don't necessarily really like bringing up the fact that they're African. Oh, they just clearly say that they're black. But when you sit down and look at who people reverence when it comes down to they can quickly tell you, oh yeah, this great 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 granddad is Irish or something. Have no connection to Irish heritage or don't look anything like Irish whatsoever. And I know people will say, well, we don't know where we come from. We got genetics today. And then there's a lot of uh, history today that is showcasing that, where we come from and where we get certain aspects of our culture from, such as the way that we use language, AAVE, African American English, or African American Vernacular English, or Ebonics, as some of us may call it. People are now finding that Ebonics does trace its roots and trace a lot of of what it does and what it got from Niger Congo languages over in Western Central Africa. The blues traces a lot of its lineage as in terms of the way that it deals with music from West Africa, from places like Senegambia, Mali, Guinea Conakry, and everything, right? And the way that they played stringed instruments. This was a major theme in Sinners, as we saw recently. We're also finding that even with some of the dances, even with dancing and everything, that there's a lot of movements that were being done that definitely can trace its lineage back over to West Africa, right? There's a lot of things that is showcasing itself time and time again that we originated from Western Central Africa, and there are studies being done showcasing that. We literally have a place in the United States down in New Orleans, Louisiana, called Congo Square, right? But we're not emphasizing this. We're not. But yet we have Europeans that are emphasizing every single day when, as our children go into classrooms or us as college students enter into classrooms, about where's the origin point of those who founded New York? Where's the origin point for why they call uh, that town in Virginia Jamestown? Or where did the name for Houston come from? A Scottish man by the name of Sam Houston, right? We know these things. So therefore, the question becomes, if we know their history and we know and we're accepting aspects of their culture, who has the dominant culture and whose culture is important? Because we can talk about all day that culture isn't important. It doesn't mean anything. We're in America right now. We're Americans. So what does that culture mean? Are you just going to let that culture be absorbed? Are you just going to let the accomplishments of your ancestors just go by the wayside and be forgotten? That's a legitimate question, because what we have to remember is that culture comes with thought systems. The moment when one culture is eliminated, right? The moment when one culture is eliminated, it's not just the culture, it's a whole worldview. Epistemicide is when it's called. So epistemicide means the death of knowledge, the destruction of knowledge, death of knowledge of some shape, sort, or form. And if this occurs where you have epistemicide, then we have a problem here, right? That means a whole worldview has been erased. This is not saying that culture is static. By no means, it's not. Culture can never be static, but also uh, we can say that culture can't be erased. Culture can die, right? Or you just have traces of it. And this does come with time, but then becomes a question of who becomes the dominant culture, and are you allowing yourself to be dominated and destroyed? That's a question that I pose to people. So it goes back to, why is it that we don't really think about the importance of our culture? Why is it that we don't think about the reason why we need to reverence that African aspect? And I've thought about this for some time. As I read literature and I pay attention to the way that we deal with certain things as gender, as a group of people, right? Uh, we don't really have a problem acknowledging the mother, acknowledging that the black mother is there, that the black mother was present, that the black mother had, dressed us up and took care of us, patted us on the head, and made sure that we were well taken care of. And I'm pinpointing this out because there is a book by a Caribbean woman by the name of Jamaica Kincaid called Autobiography of My Mother. One of the central themes in this book was about the character by the name of Zula. She came from a multiracial family, right? Her mother was a Carib woman, uh, Amerindian of sorts, or a Native American from the Caribbean, and her mother had died the moment that she was born. And then her father was a man who was of Scottish heritage. His father was Scottish, and his mother was an African woman, right? Though his Scottish father was nowhere around, was completely absent, his mother was there. His mother was there, but she was the one that took care of him, that bathed him, that fed him, made sure that she placed into him the importance of who he is and how he is a great man and etc. Right? But what you find interesting is that when this man speaks of his heritage, he doesn't ever reference his mother. He will speak about, yeah, she took care of me, cleaned me, and everything, but cares nothing whatsoever about the mother's background in all reality, or where she came from, or the importance of her story. He only paid attention to and reverenced the Scottish father he never met, never knew. Only thing that he knew was that there were aspects of his facial features and hair color that showcased he was fathered by a Scottish man. And this was pointed out as something interesting by the writer, Jamaica Kincaid, right? Because it showcases this interaction between the European and the African within the Western world. And as I say that, it leads to the segue of me pinpointing about our interaction with Europeans as well, right? There's this book, uh, read passages of it. This book is called Roll Jordan Roll by Eugene D. Genovese, and subtitled "The World the Slaves Made." Right. This goes over, the culture that was developed in the antebellum South and also post emancipation, also in the sharecropping world, about the interaction between the culture that was developed by the slaves and how it was shaped by the enslaver. And one of the key points that Mr. Genovese points out in the book is that slaves didn't really have a problem with paternalism. They just had a problem at lacking the access of certain freedoms as white people, but they didn't have a problem with white paternalism. So, in a way, is it not possible that we're carrying these thought forms over from the time period of enslavement? So, we honor our African mother, right? But we're actually seeking the attention of a European father. This is something to think about. And I don't really think we're thinking about this that much because we completely ignore everything about our African ancestry. In fact, many of us want to run away from it. But how can you truly understand who you are? How can you truly pinpoint out what is wrong within European civilization, yet you are coming from a perspective of their own and eradicating your own heritage and ideals? Because you have to have something that sets the basis of a critique, right? Now, this isn't saying that African culture is perfect whatsoever, but that's not the point here. It's the fact of protecting a worldview and showcasing how there are aspects of another worldview that could be detrimental. This is what many Native American scholars are doing and showcasing how certain aspects of um, African, of certain aspects of European culture have been detrimental to the planet due to processes of colonization. Now, we have some complex aspects of speaking about culture that's going to be very important and possibly very, very hard for us. Because keep in mind that the culture that we're having is going through a whole lot of shifts due to the aspect of we're battling due to the fact that um, we are becoming much more we are fighting and struggling with colonization, because we are considered a colonized people, just a little bit different. We are what you are considered an internal colony. An internal colony is different from, an external colony, such as, let's say, 20th century Britain and Nigeria, right? Or the Gold Coast, where the colony is far away and it's handling and it's controlling and governing its colony overseas, and those that are native to the land, but it is not, let's say, is governing those places, but at the same time, it's not the same as an internal colony. An internal colony is what you consider African Americans and Native Americans, where they're colonized by, they are living in the same area as the people that have colonized them. So therefore, their colonization takes on a different aspect, where it's a colonization of, work, resources, economics, And we find all of that going on within America because we do have in America where there is a brain drain, where the most intelligent of us are taken out of our communities and taken into the communities and to work for those of the masses or the colonizer, right? Or rather, you have where they take advantage of the economic aspects of those of the people that they oppress. And this is what you consider an internal colony. There's a little bit deeper implications to that I can't currently remember right now, but we're battling in between internal when being an internal colony and also facing an epistemicide slowly but surely because many of our elders are getting older. And not only are many of our elders getting older, but we're also happening to look at the fact that along with our elders getting older, a lot of that knowledge is being destroyed and going away along with certain aspects of our history, right? And this is very important because this is knowledge that links us to our African past, and not only links us to our African past, but also showcases to us the importance of who we are. What happens when all of that knowledge is gone? Those are things to think about. You get lost in somebody else's system. And when you get lost in somebody else's system, you're pretty much letting yourself be eradicated. So, just in one form or another. Now, with that being said, I want to also touch on much more of these Africanisms within our culture. I went on a little bit of a rant right there, but hey, that's what we do here. So, um, I want to speak about some of the Africanisms. And before I get to that, I want to introduce to everybody this book right here. This book is what we call Africanisms in America by Joseph E. Holloway. Um, very great book, highly recommended. It showcases how uh, Africans have contributed a lot to the Americas, right? Um, from in every single aspect of the culture, right? So we can start with something as simple as language. There are certain phrases within the English dialect within America that has been introduced by Senegambians, such as the word okay, right? Okay is a word that you really find that was not found prior to the 1700s. This word comes from, if I'm not mistaken, the Mandinka people, okay, which is meaning yes, right? So it found its way, which is very interesting that it wasn't here found in the English language in the 1700s, because in the 1700s is the time period, the early 1700s is the time period when a huge aspect of Senegambians coming from the Mandinka or the Wolof or the Fulani ethnic groups are being imported into the Americas, specifically North America. And a lot of these enslaved individuals that are coming from Muslim countries are also either placed in rice fields in South Carolina, or a lot of times they're preferred to be kept inside the mansion or inside the homes because they're perceived as being very intelligent due to being able to read Arabic. So it would only make a lot of sense that much of their language, their words, end up being creolized within to English, and it finds its way into mainstream English. And we don't only find this amongst the Mandinka, we also have the Fulani and the Wolof, but I'm going to speak about the Fulani, also make their contributions into English, into American English. For example, the Fulani have a word called, well, the word holla. Holla, as we use it today, a holla at me and everything, that is actually a word that is coming from the Fulani language, of which means hala. It means to talk, right? Also, you will find in much cowboy language that the Fulanis influence cowboy language. Buckaroo comes from a Fulani word called Bukra, right? And when you look at, you know, in Africanisms in America, they speak about this a little bit. Even the way that cattle herding traditions in America are set up are not the same as cattle herding traditions in Europe, not completely. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not certain which one it is, whether it's south to north or north to south, that we do. But whichever one that it is, we don't take the European approach to the cattle herding tradition. We instead take much more of the West African Fulani approach, which showcases that they impacted the cattle herding traditions in America. And even when you're dealing with, for instance, Wolof, Wolof has made a very big impact as well, because in in African American vernacular English, you don't really find this in standard English, but you find it much more in African American vernacular English. There's a word that we use called hip, right? Can I get you hip to this? Are you hip to this, right? And when you say this, it means like, okay, like if I say I'm hip, it means to know something, like you're aware of something. Um, you're aware of something. Interestingly enough, there is a Wolof phrase called hipti, right? Hipti. And hipti means to open one's eyes, right? To open one's eyes, to be enlightened, to be aware, to be knowledgeable of something. And this is a very interesting concept as well, too, because much of the words that we're using, you have to be very weary of, and there are arguments between uh, linguist, black linguist, and white linguist, concerning African American vernacular English and the origin of some of these words. Of course, there is, but you have to look at some of the words that we use even within our slang and question as well. What is its origination? Where did it come from? And it doesn't just stop there. Another word that is very interesting is the word jamboree, right? Jamboree is a Senegalese word coming from the Wolof people as well, originating from jam means slave. So beri is meaning celebration. So slave celebration, right? All of these are words that are coming from West Africa, right? That showcases our origin point. And there are also a number of Congolese words. One that ended up being used as a slur, uh, uh, ends up originating from the Congo. I won't speak about that one for real because I don't know about censorship. Um, but you know, another interesting thing is when we get into talking about music, of course, which is the most prevalent one. There's no genre that we have that could have been possible without the influence of, without the influence of West and Central Africa, right? Because our musical styles and musical traditions are not like European musical styles and traditions. There might have been there were some things that did make its way and interwove with our musical traditions, but for the most part, nobody was hearing music being made the way that we made it. There are certain ways that we play the guitar that didn't originate from European traditions. If you go and search up stringed instrumentation within West Africa and you really pay attention and just listen, especially to that not Ghana, but Senegal, Mali area where they're playing the kora. And the kora is like the form of a harp, is like a West African harp made from a calabash or a gourd, right? And a calabash or a gourd is pretty much a type of squash, a big giant squash, right? And that's another thing that I'll get to as well too, dealing with gourds. But the way that some of them play the kora in Mauritania, Senegal, Gambia, Mali, you can literally hear the stringed instrumentations and see where there are certain origins, where some of these things originate, how we gain certain influences, right? And not only that, But also, when you listen to the singing styles, it's very subtle and you really have to pay attention because a lot of people are expecting things to just be outright similar and just you just have to see it immediately, right? That's not completely the case. Um, Bear in mind, most of the culture that we have has been uh, has been developing within the past 200 years, separate from our West African roots, but it is still at the end of the day of African origin. As I tell people, we are merely Africa. We are merely Africa. Um, we're merely Africa growing and evolving within America, right? That is pretty much it when it comes down to us. We're just merely Africans that are within America and Africa existing in America that made its way to American soil, right? So, with that being said, even when you listen to the way that the singing styles are in certain West African music, whether you're listening to traditional Senegalese music or Mali music, or you're listening to traditional Yoruba music, um, or even music within, the not the Carolinas, but even music within Central and South America, right? All of these are things to pay attention to. The singing styles and the certain ways that they use words, what they stress, and everything. It's very interesting, extremely interesting, right? So I definitely encourage people to look into that. And there has been a lot of studies going on that showcase the origins of, like, showing the origins of African American music traditions, um, from Africa. And I think there has to be more studies done on it. They're doing it, but there's a lot of things where, in my personal opinion, with Africanists and historians, we could be doing more. I just think the issue is a lot of us are focusing much more on history for activism rather than history that showcases origin and everything. And I think that's something that has to change a little bit for certain reasons, but that's for a different episode on a different date. Now, also, interestingly enough, even when you look at certain names within within African American culture, does find its way, especially off the Gullah Geechee Islands. Names such as Cujo can trace its way back to Ghana, West Africa, with some of the day names, right? Such as Kwejo or Kojo, right? Within Ghana, amongst the Ashanti or the Akan people, they have day names. And many of these names coincide with certain days, and it showcases which days you were born on. And some people will even take it as far as this is what influenced certain, you'll have certain traditions where you have Aunt Monday and Uncle Tuesday and everything, and it's being rooted within these um, Akan naming traditions. Even if I'm not mistaken, I remember reading where there is a name, the name Addie. Yeah, Addie is actually finding its roots over in West Africa. If I can just find the page here within Africanisms and American English. Uh, let's see, African elements in American English. You have, I can't find it, but literally, Addie had, I believe, a connection to Yoruba naming, Africanisms. Okay, okay. So you have, let's see, I will look into this a different day and I'll post this online for you all. But there's a lot of names that they've been finding where, amongst the enslaved and even still used to this day, it can be traced back to Africa has just been used differently or said differently nowadays. But a lot of this stuff is stuff that's coming out of the woodworks that we're seeing Africa contributed to American culture. And even when we talk about um, religion and spirituality, the way that Christianity is done amongst today within not only America but most of the globe can give its thanks and appreciation to enslaved Africans within the Americas, because Christianity wasn't practiced the way that it's practiced today until Africans were being converted to Christianity, right? Um, Much of the things such as ring shouts, such as breaking out the spirit, it wasn't really done until a lot of African descendants started coming over here. And it's because there were those influences of the traditional spiritual systems and religions from Africa now merging with this new spirituality and religious systems that they're experiencing over in America. Now, I want everybody to take into consideration this as well too, right? The fact that these systems, um, no matter what religion that you might take on, the systems from your culture are still going to influence those traditions, right? So we see a lot of the influences coming from Africa. Even when we speak about food, you don't really have okra, you don't have rice, you don't have watermelon without West Africans. All of that was brought from West Africa. Black eyed peas was brought from West Africa. Also, yams, what we call sweet potatoes, yams, that's also coming from West African tradition as well too. We could have actually grow yams here, but we got the closest thing that we could get to it, which was a sweet potato. So of course, if the closest thing to yams is a sweet potato, you're gonna call it yams, right? So all of this is coming from African traditions. All of this is coming from African traditions. Even when we speak about certain folkloric statements, and I'm still researching some of these, we haven't really looked too deep off into, such as, good example, uh, if you're dreaming about fishes, that means someone's pregnant, right? Now, it's interesting that we say this and we never really sit down and think about where in the world did this concept come from. If you're dreaming about fishes, someone's pregnant, right? Now, interestingly enough, um, when you look at the origin of that, when you go back to West Africa amongst the Mami Wata cults, or let's say specifically with the Yoruba, there are two goddesses amongst the Yoruba. There's a multitude of them, but I'm just gonna focus on these two, by the name of Yemoja and Oshun, right? Yemoja and Oshun are referred to as the goddesses of fertility. And they are not only the goddesses of fertility, but one of their epithets is the mothers of fishes. Now let's think about this. If these two goddesses are the mothers of fishes and the mothers of fertility, and they're referred to as the goddesses of fertility or the goddesses of motherhood, and we say if you dream about fishes, that means that someone's pregnant. That shows a connection. That shows a connection right there. And it's not only in America that this is said. I've ran into people in Haiti, people in the Bahamas, even over in Mexico, that all have this statement going through their culture. That says a lot. That really says a lot. Then, interestingly enough, right, we have another statement. I remember I was in the car with this man from Haiti. He was my Uber driver, and we were having a conversation on culture. And I brought up a statement that, my mom and my grandma would say back in Birmingham, right? And also, you can find this amongst some other Southerners, Black Southerners especially. I know there's some people up in the Carolinas that say this, where if the sun is shining, when if it's raining and the sun is shining, that means the devil is beating his wife, right? Um, Interestingly enough, I said this in front of this man, and he said, and he laughed, and he said, "We say the same thing. Only difference is we say in Zumbi, and in Zumbi is a Vodun deity. So I believe once I when I get time to really do the research for that, it's gonna be extremely interesting to find out um, where does that originate, because I think Nzumbi is a Kikongo word, a word from the Kikongo people, and I'll have to definitely look into that. But my point is, we have to pay reverence to our cultures. We see that all of this stuff is stringing back over to Africa, and we can't let people tell us that this doesn't matter because it's you. Why is it that you're saying you don't matter? And I want you to really think about that. This is concerning you. And even when people try saying, oh, that's in the past, it doesn't matter, this is the future, as much as people say that, these are typically people who have been surrounded with who they are all their lives. These are people who have been surrounded with the fact that their streets named after indirect or direct ancestors of theirs. Their history is taught in classrooms each and every day. From their history, they're able to construct new cultures and histories based off of what they learned in history. If what was done in the past meant absolutely nothing, get rid of teaching about history then and see how much progress you will have. Because people are pretty much basing stuff off of what they've seen or ideas that they heard from the past. So that's all that I got today. This is the end of the first episode. I thank all of you for uh, pretty much watching. Please go ahead and uh, like, subscribe, and share to Onyx Thought on YouTube. Uh, follow us on Instagram at the Onyx Thought on Instagram, and of course, um, you know, uh, on Facebook it's just purely Benjamin Kane. I encourage all of you to please go ahead and follow me and everything, and keep up with us. And also, very soon we'll also post up the Patreon, but get on the Patreon as well. We'll put that in the description so you can keep getting all of this. With the Patreon, we'll just put out the video completely raw. But here on YouTube, or unless you catch it on the live for YouTube, we're just pretty much going to put out certain pieces, but the whole part of the whole episode of this podcast you will find on the Patreon. So again, we thank you for looking at the video. We thank you for hopping in on the live wherever you all might be, and we'll catch you all next Sunday. Bye.